Welcome everyone to our first ever episode of Escaping the Cave with Garrido. I'm a philosophy professor, the director at the Midwestern Marx Institute, and the Secretary of Education for the American Communist Party. I'm also the author of various books and many articles. And amongst the books, you have The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism from 2023, and Why We Need American Marxism from 2024. This show is going to be dedicated to covering the areas that I work in as a scholar, primarily those being philosophy and geopolitics. Later in our program, we will be joined by our first ever guest, Haz Al-Din, the philosopher and political theorist behind the Infrared Collective. He is also the executive chairman of the American Communist Party and the person that developed the viral concept of MAGA Communism. We'll be speaking to him later today. But for now, I want to say a few things about China and the monkey wrench it threw into the world of artificial intelligence. Up until 2025, the markets that were tied to AI were extremely profitable because partially they assumed that the billions of dollars in infrastructure that were required by some of these companies were going to be a given going forward. And so they assumed that the amount of capital that was necessary in order to have a product like the various forms of AI in the market was going to stay somehow consistent. In addition to that, because of that amount of investment required for these products, they also assumed that there would always be, for the top programs, a certain form of paywall, as there is, for instance, for ChatGPT 4, which is approximately around $20 a month. This is where DeepSeek, the Chinese startup, comes in. Last month, it threw a complete monkey wrench into this whole arrangement because it provided a service, an AI model that was comparable to things like GPT-4 for a fraction of the price of GPT-4. Not only did it take approximately 1/10 of an investment to produce, which was estimates say around $6 million, but it was provided open source. That means that anyone has, the general public has access to the codes, the algorithms, and the model architecture so that they can then go ahead and either use it freely or innovate upon it or, modify it in whatever means they see fit. Now imagine what is going through the heads of these shareholders of Western capitalist AI companies and the investors that have seen this whole terrain of potentially profitable enterprises literally burn into flames in one day thanks to this Chinese AI. Now, let me give you a thought experiment for those that are not all that caught up in this AI world, which I'll admit I myself am no tech expert. In fact, I sometimes refer to myself as a tech caveman. What has happened here is very simple. Let's imagine that my family are apple farmers. In order to produce the batch of apples that we take to the market, it takes us around $10 of investment to do so. Then when I take those apples to the market, I end up selling the whole batch somewhere around the $20 to $30 range. It's a profitable arrangement, one that allows me to have the confidence to continue investing money in it. But now let's imagine that a farmer from another town comes in, and somehow this farmer was able to develop apples that were as good as mine and as many apples as the ones that I bring to the batch for $1. And to make matters worse, not only was he able to do all of this for just $1, but he ends up offering it to the netizens of the market for free. This, of course, would completely destroy my enterprise. Why in the world would anyone pay for my apples, let alone what I was charging for them previously, when now they can get an apple that's as good for free? In essence, this is what DeepSeek did to the AI markets. It completely destroyed the foundation for the profitability of these enterprises. We have to ask ourselves, how was this able to happen? Was it some fluke of luck that allowed the Chinese to develop this very innovative and efficient technology and then be able to give it out for free? No, I don't think it was just a fluke of luck. I think this is one of the many, many facts that allow us to realize the, evident superiority of communist governance. We have been told for a very, very long time here in the West, since at least the 70s, when the discourse of neoliberalism becomes dominant, that if you have any sort of government interference in markets, what are you going to get? Well, you're going to get the stifling of innovation. From thinkers like Friedrich Hayek and his The Road to Serfdom, to the popular criticisms of socialism that come from the ilk of people like Milton Friedman. The assumption is that if you have a government that is overseeing the market and these different forms of enterprises to ensure that they end up working for the common good or for social welfare, what you're actually going to have is a quite negative result. You're going to have the stifling at best and the regressing at worst of the innovative tendencies within humanity. You're going to have a society that is either going to go backwards or completely be stationed in the same place it's been at for a very long time. It's very interesting that some of these ideas end up developing at the time where the Soviet Union has very clearly beat the United States in the space race, which, I don't know about you guys, but I think being able to do what they did in terms of space exploration is pretty innovative to me. Don't you think that that takes at least a bit of innovative and creative capacities? But that's neither here nor there. China has just blown up this conception that somehow socialism stifles innovation, because it was able to do what the most advanced capitalist countries have been able to do in one of their most advanced technological areas in a much more efficient manner, so efficient and so cost effective that they can now literally give it out for free. What this demonstrates is that China has basically proved through its existence that development and technological innovation under socialism, it's much greater, it's much more efficient, it's much more universal in the sense that you don't have these, idiotic intellectual property laws and patents that prevent you from genuinely developing on something. How much development could we have had with AI if there wasn't so many blockages for brilliant people who could have developed on it and improved it and modified it? If those blockages didn't exist, then why do they exist? They exist because the purpose of development is not promoting development itself and technological innovation, but acquiring profit. And I'm going to block people away from anything that gets in the way of me achieving my bottom line. Why would I give people access to the thing that allows me to derive profits? It doesn't make any sense from the standpoint of the logic of capital. So what China has effectively demonstrated is that that logic, contrary to what we have been told, is not the one that is most efficient for the development of humanity and for technological innovation. On the contrary, it's quite a bit of a fetter on such innovation. If only there was a bearded and long-haired man in the 19th century that would have told us this. At an even more basic level, I think we should be embarrassed if we ever bought into this delusion that it's from the interest of accumulating bigger and bigger numbers in one's bank account that technological innovation and other forms of development come about. That's not true at all. In fact, when the motive is profit and not innovation itself, you have things like planned obsolescence. That phenomenon that occurs with all of our phones and technological devices and everything else, really, where the thing we buy is literally has it built into itself the breaking down of that product within a few years. For what? Just so that we're forced to go to the market and buy another one, and therefore spend more and therefore derive more profits. In addition, if the motive behind actions is simply deriving profit, what would prevent people from just making money, from making money from debts or rents or other forms of speculative enterprises which don't actually produce anything that's productive, don't actually develop anything, but just parasitically end up making money out of money? You know, some of the world's greatest religions would just call this usury. It's interesting because here in the US, we call this establishing a passive income, which is a very neat way of whitewashing what would be a much more accurate phrase, which would be parasitic income. But, you know, if the profit motive is the bottom line, as it is in capitalism, that's why it's called capitalism. The whole point is to accumulate capital. Don't you think that we'll get to a point where there wouldn't even be an incentive to develop productive enterprises if you can make money and from other speculative means? And isn't this exactly what has happened to capitalist countries, leading, of course, with the US, since at least the 70s, when we have this great crisis of, you know, we'd call it in the Marxist tradition a crisis of overproduction, where you have the results of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and it gets to a point where the capitalist class is forced to ask itself, how do I reinvest this capital? Do I reinvest it in productive enterprise? Well, that's not bringing profit. So I have two options. Either I take my productive enterprises abroad, where I can save money by saving on the cost of production, paying workers pennies on the dollars. That's what happened, of course. You have stuff like NAFTA and the fleeing of big companies to Asia, South America, etc. The other thing I could do is derive profits from just these speculative means, from stock buybacks, various forms of stock and market manipulations, from interest rates, which is what the big banks do, from land speculation, and from other forms of enterprises that don't actually produce anything that is helpful for society. This is what has been happening in the West. Meanwhile, in China, where, you know, the aim of growth is actual growth, the actual betterment and improvement of society, the actual improvement of the well-being of its people, they don't consider these artificial numerical increases in, you know, in GDP. They don't consider that to be the essence of growth. For them, the essence of growth is actually developing the real economy. And what have we seen? At no point in all of human history have we been able to observe the level of development that we've seen from China in just the last 40 years. I mean, it's completely unprecedented. Some may say, well, this is because of capitalism, and what happens in China is this counter-revolution in 1978 with the reform and opening up, and after that, China becomes capitalist. I say, well, if that's capitalism, then let's do some of that here. Let's put the Communist Party in charge. Let's put the key industries in the hands of the state to function on behalf of the Communist Party and for the sake of public welfare. Let's ensure that private enterprises are overseen by members of the Communist Party to ensure that if there's growth at the level of the company, it reflects itself in better living standards for the workers in the company and a positive social effect at large. You know, let's develop national banks so that we ensure that this form of lending is not parasitic and aimed at just trapping people in debt, but that whatever loans are giving out are capable of being paid back and given for the sake of promoting productive development and development projects, etc. Let's have the ability to send the corrupt politicians and banksters and big capitalists to prison, or worse at times, as a form of punishment for their corruption. I think you see where I'm getting at here. It isn't capitalism that has allowed China to develop. It is precisely because it's not capitalist that it's been able to not only develop, but develop quicker than the West, and to avoid a lot of the pitfalls of capitalist development that we've seen in the West over the last 40 years. Please tell me the last time a global crisis such as what we saw in 2008 actually hurt China. In fact, it was in part China that helped save the world in 2008 because it wasn't hit, because it was able to prevent some of the more negative effects of that crisis because it had government control and oversight of industries. So when Xi Jinping tells us that China's greatness is a testament to the correctness of Marxist-Leninist theory, of Marxist-Leninist philosophy, perhaps we should listen and not just shoo it away. When we really think about it, the development that China has brought into the world really makes the heads of the Western elites blow up. The success of China is completely undeniable, but it can't be attributed in the eyes of the Western elites to communist leadership. We can't say, no, it's China's communist governance that's been able to lead this development. It must be because China's actually capitalist. But then when the people in the Western countries say, okay, well, if that's capitalism, then let's do some of that capitalism. Let's have these policies that resemble China's capitalist policies. What do the Western elites tell them? They tell them, no, slow down. We can't do that because that's communism. In his 1877 article, The Fixation of Belief, the brilliant and very innovative American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, the founder of American pragmatism itself, wrote, quote, "When an ostrich buries its head in the sand as danger approaches, it very likely takes the happiest course. It hides the danger and then calmly says there is no danger. And if it feels perfectly sure there is none, then why should it raise its head to see?" This is effectively what the Western capitalist elites have done. As they show themselves unable to cope with the objective superiority of socialist and communist governance in China, they have no resort but to stick their heads in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. But danger is approaching them. And as time passes, many more DEEPSEEKs are going to be coming our way to blow up the invented worlds that they have created. With that, we conclude the first part of our program. Make sure to stick around as on our next segment, we will be having the philosopher and political theorist Haz Al-Din from the Infrared Collective come to talk to us about the first few weeks of the Trump administration and the trajectory it seems to be embarking on. We'll also be talking a little bit about MAGA Communism, why it is still completely misunderstood by large segments of the American left, and about the American Communist Party, which has just embarked on its new recruitment launch. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this. Friends, we live under a dictatorship of capital still, which means that in order to keep up the work that we're doing, we need financial contributions. There's many different ways in which you can help us financially. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. You can buy some of our books, which you can find at midwesternmarx.com/books. You can sign up for my classes and the other classes we offer with our Marxism School, which you can see at the Midwestern Marx selfie page. You can also support my work personally as a writer and everything else that I do through Substack at my Substack page, which is Philosophy in Crisis. In addition, if you want to support the American Communist Party financially, you can also donate to the party at acp.us. If you want to subscribe to the party's journal, which I am the chief editor of, you can do so at redamerica.acp.us. And if you can't support us financially at all, at least help us get our message out there. Share this program on your social media, share it with your friends and family and co-workers, and get it out as far and wide as possible. We thank you dearly. Welcome, Haz. It's a real pleasure to have you on for our first ever episode of Escaping the Cave.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So Trump has recently restated his commitment to impose 100% tariffs on any of the BRICS countries that move towards de-dollarization, so trading with other forms of currency than the US dollar. Do you think we're going to see some sort of trade tariff war in this Trump administration? What do you think are going to be the effects of such actions? And What is the importance, what is the role of dollar hegemony for the US's geopolitical standing in this age of super imperialism?
Well, the simple answer to the last question is that it gives the United States the ability to impose sanctions on all of the countries that it has political disagreements and problems with. That is the main and primary tool that's obvious. But there's also the fact that the dollar hegemony plays a role in the concentration and centralization of financial capital, which is the ability to actually issue loans and credit, which is very desperately needed for developing countries, into Anglo-Saxon international finance and Wall Street and the City of London. So it also gives it a monopoly on credit. But the fact is that what Trump is doing is accelerating the consolidation of a separate global financial system, which BRICS, I think, is the represents the beginning stages of. But just out of sheer practical necessity, we're going to see an aggressively um, new effort to basically craft a new financial world order. And it's going to be a game of, power politics. It's going to be a game of, um, how should I say, a game of chicken in a lot of ways, right? Because you have a kind of game theoretical scenario where the United States is going to do something which is not in the interest of the ruling classes of the various BRICS countries who would prefer to just kind of keep things comfortable, but on the other hand, is deeply unpopular with the masses. So I also think it introduces a new dimension of class struggle into the equation. So whether Trump succeeds or not, it's going to be political. It's going to be a question of class struggle and leverage. Are these states going to acquiesce and cave in when it comes to their sovereignty? Or are they going to put up a fight and sacrifice and throw overboard the immediate short term interests of their ruling classes?
So 2 years have passed since you first developed the concept, the meme, the theory of MAGA communism. And somehow there's still many American so-called leftists out there that seem to assume it has anything to do with supporting Donald Trump. Recently, when Trump made his comments about Gaza just a week or so ago, where he said that the U.S. was basically going to openly colonize and take over Gaza, which, to be honest, it's not that much of a break from what we saw with the Biden administration. This stark contrast that they're trying to create, it's not necessarily there. It's the continuation of a genocidal policy, but it's beyond the point. When this happened, there was leftists all over Twitter saying that the bubble that we had of this anti-imperialist Trump presidency had completely popped, which of course is very ridiculous. Now, you and I know that MAGA communism has absolutely nothing to do with supporting Trump and everything to do with winning over and recognizing the objective character of the MAGA working class base as a partisan force, the only one in the American political spectrum. Why do you think so many people on the left continue to push this baseless narrative that we support Trump? Do you think it's just ignorance? Do you think they're bad faith actors? Do you think it's a mixture of both? And one of the interesting things that we've already started seeing in the last couple of weeks of this Trump presidency is regular MAGA working class people saying that Trump betrayed MAGA. Do you think that we're going to be seeing a split between the MAGA working class base and Trump?
Oh, the rift is already there. And that's what I mean, look, the people that are leading this effort that you're talking about are bad faith actors. They know exactly what we mean by MAGA communism. They are intentionally attempting to pin upon us positions that we have never claimed to have, but which superficially, if you present us using Trump memes, appear to be true, that we have always supported Trump. And my reproach to that is very simple. Hassan Piker and all of these left liberals who all of our bad faith actor detractors rely upon for support, and that's their audience basically. They were making JD Pond Don memes
Yeah.
just recently before that. And those were ironic, funny memes. So we made memes and they made memes that depicted Trump positively, but it didn't actually seriously amount to, in either case, serious belief that Trump is a principled anti-imperialist.
Right.
Rather, it's just an acknowledgement of the fact that Trump has inadvertently opened the floodgates
Yes.
in terms of the political phenomena that he represents, which represents the heightened acceleration of contradictions within the United States of America. And that includes opening up the dimension for the first time since the very beginning of neoliberalism, which eradicated this element of partisanship, political partisanship. And Trump is not anything particularly new when it comes to politics, when it comes to his beliefs and principles. What is new is the form. The form and the platform is new. The new cybernetic form of populism that is hyper partisan and is primarily has as its subject, a notion of concrete national self-interest, as opposed to the neoliberal universalism that had prevailed before. So this is what MAGA has introduced, and it's an open door as far as what the future of that is actually going to mean. And the rifts that you're talking about are here, primarily in the new conflict of interest that's growing in the tensions between the Silicon Valley wing and the blue-collar working class wing that was behind Trump's election and campaign. So we're going, the new battleground of politics presupposes MAGA. There's no going back to neoliberal democracy. That's why we no longer emphasize the term MAGA communism, because it's superfluous, because MAGA has already won, and we are already in MAGA politics. Everyone is MAGA now. Democrats, liberals, leftists, rightists, whatever. Everyone, including our bad faith detractors, now presuppose this new context of politics.
The American Communist Party launched around 6 months ago now, and it made a tremendous splash both nationally and internationally. As we prepare to embark on our first ever recruitment drive, how would you assess the first 6 months of the party? What would you like to see in the next 6 months? And how do you think that the party is going to be able to capitalize on this rift between the MAGA working class base and Trump? What would you say, for instance, to the working class MAGA person who is watching this interview right now?
I would say our party has been characterized by a steady and solid and consistent degree of growth, and it's on a steady, straight and narrow path. And it has had certain bumps along the way, and that is inevitable for any organization. But the important thing is that we are weathering it. We have weathered it. And that has proven a degree of resilience in our organization that I don't think is there for others. So we are on a steady and consistent path, and the important thing is to maintain course regardless of the tide. And that's what we have been doing, and that's what we have succeeded in doing. And I think we've accomplished more as a party in the past 6 months than the mainstream leftist organizations have in decades in terms of bringing honor and notoriety, positively, by the way. I think you can use the word in a positive sense. I'm not sure. Fame, at least, to the word communism. And the attacks that we have gotten, we expected. We knew it wasn't going to be easy. I think that we basically were created to prepare for this moment in American politics. That is why we are the front and center of attention for everyone right now on the left, because they're basically acquiescing to the fact that they weren't prepared for this new world we're entering into. And we did prepare. And we're basically the only game in town now, as far as the left wing is concerned. My message to the MAGA working class is that Trump by himself will not save you. And it's not because he's extraordinarily bad. It's not because he's an extraordinarily evil person. It's because without a principle of collective organization, an individual can only do so much. And the people that surround Trump will dominate his administration, regardless of his intentions or what you think about his intentions.
Comrade Haz, thank you so much for being the show's first guest. Thank you all for watching the first episode of Escaping the Cave with Carlos Garrido. Many more to come. We'll see you all next time.